The African sun rises over a land where blood and tradition are inextricably woven into the dry soil. A young boy and his mother walk across the scorched earth, cast out from their kin with nothing but their names. Young Shaka endured the mocking laughter of other boys who labeled him illegitimate and weak. Every insult thrown at him was a seed of fire planted deep within his growing heart. Nandi whispered stories of greatness into his ears to shield him from the cruelty of the world. As he grew, the boy realized that traditional warfare was nothing more than a ritualized dance of cowards. He watched as men threw their long spears, missing targets and waiting for the enemy to throw them back. Shaka sought out a blacksmith to forge a weapon that would never leave his hand. The result was the Ikloa, a short-handled stabbing spear designed for lethal close-quarters combat. He practiced for hours, learning to use his heavy shield to hook an opponent's defense aside. When he joined the Mthethwa army, his unconventional methods quickly caught the eye of King Dingiswayo. During his first real battle, Shaka did not throw his spear but sprinted directly into the enemy lines. The opposing warriors froze in confusion as this madman closed the distance in seconds. With a single brutal thrust, Shaka proved that close-range lethality was superior to distant posturing. King Dingiswayo realized he had discovered a wolf among sheep. Shaka was given command of his own regiment, which he began to train with merciless discipline. He forced his men to discard their sandals and run barefoot over thorns to toughen their feet. Those who hesitated were executed on the spot, ensuring absolute obedience through fear. He began to develop a tactical formation that would change the map of Africa forever. News of his rising power reached the ears of the father who had once rejected him. Shaka did not seek reconciliation, but awaited the perfect moment to settle old debts. When his father died, Shaka moved quickly to claim the Zulu throne by force. He eliminated his half-brother with surgical precision, leaving no room for dissent. Now the leader of his people, he began to mold the small Zulu clan into a war machine. He discarded the old shields and replaced them with larger, tougher cowhide variants. The surrounding tribes watched in terror as the Zulus began to march with rhythmic, terrifying speed. Shaka demanded total war, where the goal was no longer to skirmish, but to annihilate. Villages were burned to the ground, and their survivors were integrated into the Zulu fold. Any man who could still fight was given a choice: join the empire or die with his ancestors. This was the Mfecane, the great crushing that reshaped the entire southern continent. Shaka's enemies began to group together, hoping to stop the tide of his expanding kingdom. He welcomed their resistance, for it only gave him more opportunities to test his tactics. He organized his soldiers into the Impi, a force more organized than any Africa had ever seen. He was no longer just an outcast, he was a god-king in the making. Legend says that even the animals of the savannah fled when the earth shook with the march of the Zulus. Shaka spent his nights dreaming of even more efficient ways to kill and conquer. Only Nandi remained his soft spot, the one person who could calm the storm in his soul. But his heart was hardening with every tribe he assimilated into his growing machine. He prepared his men for the greatest test of their lives, a battle that would cement the buffalo horns. But as he prepared for external conquest, shadows began to move within his own royal court. While the king looked toward the horizon, he failed to notice the sharp blades being hidden closer to home. The world was about to witness the full power of the buffalo, but would the beast survive its own hunger? The dawn of a new era broke over the rolling hills of Zululand as Shaka surveyed his growing army. He knew that tradition was a shackle that had kept the clans weak and divided for centuries. The long, flimsy throwing spears of the past were cast aside in favor of the deadly Ikla stabbing spear. Every warrior was now required to stand toe-to-toe with the enemy in brutal close-quarters combat. Shaka began drilling his men in the revolutionary tactical maneuver known as the Impi formation. The formation was designed to mimic the head and horns of a charging buffalo. The chest of the buffalo would engage the enemy head-on to fix them in place. Meanwhile, the horns would race out to the left and right to encircle the unsuspecting foe. Finally, the loins served as a massive reserve, kept out of sight to deliver the finishing blow. To ensure the speed of his horns, Shaka famously banned the wearing of sandals. Any man who showed pain or slowed down was seen as a liability to the entire nation. The first major test of this doctrine came against the rival Ndwandwe tribe. As the Zulu war cry erupted, the Ndwandwe realized they were not facing a traditional raiding party. The horns closed with lightning speed, trapping thousands within a ring of death. It was no longer a battle of honor, but a systematic slaughter designed for total annihilation. Victory was absolute, and word of the buffalo began to spread like wildfire across the land. Shaka did not just kill his enemies, he integrated the survivors into his own ranks. They were told they were no longer Nwandwe or Mthethwa, but children of the Zulu. The Zulu nation was no longer a small clan, but a rapidly expanding empire. This expansion came at a terrible cost known as the Mfecane, or the crushing. Thousands fled the Zulu advance, causing a domino effect of war and famine throughout the region. Shaka's discipline was absolute, and his punishments were legendary for their cruelty. A single mistake on the parade ground could lead to an immediate execution. He had created a machine of war that required constant momentum to survive. Each new conquest brought more cattle, more land, and more warriors for the king. The capital city of Bulawayo grew into a massive fortress of power. Shaka often climbed the nearby hills to look down upon his creation with pride. But with such rapid growth, the seeds of internal jealousy began to take root. His half-brothers Dingane and Mrangana watched from the periphery with growing resentment. Shaka ignored the whispers, believing his military success made him untouchable. He launched a massive campaign against the Zwaide, the last great threat to his northern borders. The Zwaide were numerous, but they lacked the iron discipline of the Zulu Impi. Shaka personally led the charge, his Iklwa dripping with the blood of tribal kings. By the end of the day, the Zwaide power was broken forever. Shaka was now the undisputed king of the largest empire Southern Africa had ever seen. Yet, in his moments of solitude, he sought the counsel of only one person, his mother, Nandi. She was his anchor in a world of violence and shifting loyalties. He ordered that she be treated with the same reverence as the king himself. But the physical toll of her long life was beginning to show. Shaka summoned every healer and witch doctor in the kingdom to her side. He threatened to execute anyone who could not find a cure for her fading strength. As Nandi's health declined, so too did Shaka's grip on his own sanity. He began to see enemies in every shadow, even among his most loyal generals. One fateful night, the great Queen Mother drew her final breath. As her heart stopped, a darkness fell over Shaka that would lead to the bloodiest chapter in Zulu history. The silence that followed Nandi's final breath was heavier than any defeat Shaka had ever known on the battlefield. He emerged from the royal enclosure with a face that had been drained of all humanity and replaced by a cold obsidian mask. The king decreed that the land itself must weep, ordering that no crops be planted and no milk be consumed for an entire year. Thousands of subjects gathered at the royal capital, their voices rising in a forced, frantic mourning that masked their growing fear. Shaka's grief quickly curdled into a paranoia so deep that he began to see enemies in the eyes of his most loyal mourners. Anyone caught not weeping with enough conviction was summarily executed on the spot by the royal guards. Pregnant women and their husbands were slaughtered by the hundreds. as Shaka claimed that no life should begin while his mother's had ended. The king's mind became a fractured landscape where the spirits of the dead spoke louder than the living. His half-brothers, Dingain and Mhlangana, watched from the periphery as the empire they helped build began to rot from within. They realized that the great elephant was no longer leading the herd, but trampling it into the dust. Even the elite regiments began to whisper in their barracks, their once unwavering loyalty tested by the king's erratic bloodlust. Shaka ordered impossible military campaigns, sending his men into the wilderness without food or hope of return. The legendary Buffalo Horns formation was now being used to hunt down his own starving subjects. Shaka spent his nights staring at the stars, searching for a sign that his mother had forgiven him for his failures. He began to execute his advisors, convinced that they were poisoning his food and stealing his strength. The king's personal bodyguard, Mbopa, was finally approached by the brothers to join the conspiracy. A secret pact was sealed in the dead of night, written in the shared blood of those who once called Shaka their lord. By the year 1828, the Zulu kingdom was a shadow of its former glory, drained of its spirit by a mourning that never ended. Shaka sat in his kraal at Dukuza, unaware that the sun was setting on his reign for the final time. The air was thick with the scent of rain and the unspoken promise of violence. Dingain and Mhlangana crept through the tall grass, their shadows elongating as the light faded. Shaka was busy scolding a group of messengers, his back turned to the fence where his killers waited. Mbopa struck first, driving a spear into Shaka's side with a precision born of years of service. The great king stumbled, his eyes widening in disbelief as he looked into the face of his trusted guard. Then came the brothers, their spears flashing in the dying light as they closed in for the kill. Even as his blood soaked the earth, Shaka did not beg for mercy, but cursed his brothers with his final breath. He warned them that the white swallows from across the sea would soon rule the land they had stolen from him. The last thrust of the spear was silent, and the man who had reshaped Africa finally lay still. The news of his death spread like a wildfire through the hills, bringing a mixture of relief and terrifying uncertainty. They buried him in an unmarked grave, fearing that even in death, his spirit might return to demand vengeance. Dingain took the throne, but he soon found that he could not fill the massive shadow left by his brother. The revolutionary military system Shaka created would survive, but the heart of the empire had been cut out. Shaka Zulu was a man of contradictions, a genius of war who was ultimately destroyed by the weight of his own power. He had taken a small, insignificant clan and turned it into a nation that would challenge empires. In the valleys of KwaZulu-Natal, the wind still whispers the names of the warriors who fell in his service. His legacy remains a complex tapestry of innovation, unification, and unfathomable cruelty. Historians still debate the true nature of the man, but none can deny the impact he left on the world. The tragedy of Shaka was that he could conquer everything except the demons within his own heart. As the dust of history settles, the image of the great king remains etched into the spirit of his people. The legend of Shaka Zulu endures, a testament to the power of a single vision to change the course of history forever.